Coming up on the CHGO Cubs podcast, are the Cubs actually going to go from Ray to Roki in the span of 1 week? And is the rotation actually better than it was a year ago? We're looking for a trade partner out west. Bundle up, baby. We're nice like ice. CHGO Cubs next. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? It's the CHGO Cubs podcast. It is lucky number 13, January 13th. A nice, cold, sunny Monday here in Chicago. We're ready to warm you up with a little Cubs baseball talk. Luke Stuckmeyer, Cody Delmendo. We have Joey 2.0 running the ones and twos today.
Looks a little bit
Or we call
older.
him New Joey.
We can call him New Joey.
New
I like
Joey.
New Joey.
2.0.
Yeah. Because if you say 2.0, it's
disrespectful
kind of
to original
disrespectful.
Joey?
Yeah. Well, not even to original Joey, but just like to Joey right in front of us. Like, he's at the same level, I would say. He's here. We
That's
allowed
right.
him in the building.
New Joey.
He can just
I
be
get
New
that
Joey.
new car smell a little bit. That 2025 new car
I
smell.
love a new car smell. I know it's toxic plastic, but I still love that smell. That's one of my favorites. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to show you an interview we did with a podcaster out west about trade partners potentially for the Cubs. That's coming up later in the show. And we're also going to talk about how badly the Cubs may or may not have screwed up this Kyle Tucker thing. That's all in a bit. But we do want to mention, first of all, we haven't had a chance to talk about the Colin Ray signing.
Yeah.
We've been looking for depth. It's 1 year, $5 million guaranteed, $750,000 buyout on a $6 million club option for the following year. So it could be 2 years at a very affordable rate for what is, in my opinion, an insurance plan.
Yeah.
Is it expensive insurance? Maybe. I don't get why people are so mad about it. There are people on the internet that are just like, that's the move we're going to make.
Well, let's just be honest about it and say that the optics, like the timing of it, isn't exactly great with the Kyle Tucker and Cubs arbitration news the day before. I think there's more little tidbits coming out about Roki and the Dodgers that might be inevitable, what we've all thought all along, but, you know, it's not official yet, so who knows. So I think the people very upset about signing Colin Ray, like up in arms, like ready to go jump into the lake.
Yeah,
I think
especially today.
Especially on a day like today when it's 12 degrees out. I think that in general, it's all based off the stuff that has come out the last couple days. Hell, they even passed up $3 million on Jorge Lopez, which I'm not at the top of the hill screaming like, why didn't we bring back Jorge Lopez? But it's like, this is a nice deal for the Nationals. What did the Cubs see in him that they don't like? Like, you need bullpen help. You need another veteran or two. Like, for $3 million, like, why didn't you bring Jorge Lopez back? So, in general, I just think that the optics, everything that's happened over the last 4 or 5 days in Cubs land, people just see a move like, oh, 1 year, $5 million, cheap Ricketts again. And, like, I'm not – listen, I've done a lot of complaining about ownership this entire offseason. Don't get me started about not calling Juan Soto, okay? But objectively, I agree with you. Like, the move is solid. He pitched almost 170 innings last year for the Brewers, and Craig Counsell knows him. He was the manager for him. He helped Colin Ray.
The Cubs know him.
Well, the Cubs obviously know him, but I would say that you can give Craig Counsell a little bit of credit in how he used him to carve out a decent major league career, because when he was with the Cubs, he was just trying to make a career at the time.
Right.
He was like one of those journeyman type guys, and for him to make $5 million off the 2 years he did with Milwaukee, like, that's a solid, like, credit to him. Like, he deserves a lot of credit for himself to earn that $5 million. I'm not saying he's going to come in and it's going to move the needle significantly for the Cubs. And I think that's another thing that fans are upset about it too, is the fact that it's not a move that makes me sit here and think that, oh, we are going to win 90 games. But when you're talking about depth and you're talking about, you know, the injury bug that this team has had the last couple of years, like, yeah, it's fine.
It also doesn't mean you're taking your name out of the Roki sweepstakes, as small of a chance as you might have. It's not like you're calling up and saying like, hey, never mind, we're out.
But I think another thing too, to me, when I saw the news, I was like, okay, are they going to trade Javier Assad or Jordan Wicks now?
Right.
Because until proven otherwise, I just don't think they're done trying to add a top-line rotational starter. If Jed Hoyer is going to sit at the season-ending press conference, Luke, and tell us that the weather had a big impact in the Cubs' offense, how can he say that and then assume that he's going to get the same stuff from the rotation in 2025?
Can't have it both ways.
How can he assume that he's going to get those same results? You know, and again, I think that they've done well adding depth to the rotation with the Ray signing. I like the Matthew Boyd signing outside the fact that the injury risk does give me a little bit of concern. And I like Shota, I like Steele, and I like Tyone as solid guys in there. And I think Steele and Shota for sure are solid, like number 2, have a ceiling of maybe being a number 1, maybe, but like it's a lot of hoping and wishing, you know? Yeah. So to me, like they still got to be in on either if you're going free agent wise, it's Jack Flaherty, or are they, once Roki signs, will the trade market open back up for you, or will the Twins be more open to moving Pablo Lopez? Will the Cubs be able to work something out with the Mariners? I don't know. I'm just saying that I think that there's still a possibility of the trade market being a path to add a starting pitcher. And I just think if they're going to win the division in 25, they need to add another top of the rotation arm to go with Steele and Imanaga. That, for me to fully believe that they can win the division on opening day, I think they need to do that.
Well, the live YouTube chat is up and running, which is the best way to enjoy the CHGO experiences. Go ahead, get in there, subscribe to the CHGO Sports YouTube page, and then engage with us. Hope you're a diehard, all of those things. See in the Discord. Gary's in all of those places. Gary Ross, credit to Gary. I would agree with this. You're talking about the Smiley role. You're also talking about the Wisniewski role you have to fill.
Yeah.
Like, don't just forget that those guys pitched innings. And, yes, it could mean that maybe Assad is on the move. But either way, it's stacking enough of those pieces that you can withstand some of those moves.
Yeah.
And if they're all here, they're all here. That's fine, too.
Yeah.
So, but now the one move that came with it was the RES being DFA'd to make room on the 40-man roster, and you said social media wasn't too thrilled with that.
I didn't see a lot of like
love.
I didn't see anyone happy about it, and I tend to agree. Like this guy was kind of pushed to fans about how he was a position player, and the Cubs found like they're trying to convert him into a pitcher, and he had success in the lower part of the minors, got up to AAA. I believe pitched in AAA most of last season, and it wasn't exactly great. So like now are the Cubs thinking that it's like
they've seen the top?
Have they seen the best? Like, I don't know. All I'm saying is I think for a guy that's ranked in your top 30 of prospects, if you're just going to DFA him, to me that's bad. But the only way that I feel like it could go in a way that at least makes some sense is if before he hits waivers or whatever it's called, maybe the Cubs trade him.
I would say this: you hope that your franchise gets to the point where making moves for the 40-man roster starts to hurt a little bit because you had hope for somebody instead of it just being like, well, that could be the next grad. You hope they start having to get rid of guys that you know you want them to hang on to. Like, I don't know if they need to hang on to him or not.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I would like it to get to the point where you're like, wow, they had to DFA so-and-so, and he's been great for the team. But they've gotten so good that they don't have room for him anymore.
Yeah, and they have all these other fringe guys on their roster too. Why Why remove Arias? I don't know. They also DFA'd Miles Mastrobuoni, which was a tough 24 hours for me too. So
yeah, how did you handle that?
Well, we poured one out.
Yeah,
we poured one out.
Went to bone and beef.
Yeah. When I say I poured one out, I legitimately I didn't drink it because I'm currently not drinking until opening day.
Out, yeah.
I did pour one out and then made a nice little trip to Taco Bell. Got the cheesy gordita crunch.
Made you feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As the president of the Miles Mastrobuoni fan club, it was a tough day. And then the Tucker arbitration news came out like an hour later. I was like, man, this sucks. Tough day for us.
In reality, a lot of it's just kind of off-season minutia, though.
Yeah.
Not I guess one or two of those things could end up being some major play, but in the long run, when you get to the middle of next season, will we go back and say, "Wow, they miss Arias," or "Wow, what a great move Ray was," or?
Well, I do think that the Ray signing.
I still think, yeah. Go ahead.
The Ray signing for sure we can look back and be like, "Wow, that was a solid move by Jed."
Or it could be nothing.
Right. Because in my opinion, I think Ray is basically a older version of Javier Assad. Like last season, Ray had a K rate of 18.9%. Javier Assad doesn't generate a lot of strikeouts either. You know what I mean? So that's why, in my opinion, the Ray signing could potentially be a replacement for Assad if Assad is part of a trade after Roki is moved. If not, and you got both, then I mean,
could be getting ahead of it.
Yeah, you could be getting ahead of it. You could also, adding them both and being able to use them in swingman type roles. I think that's the thing too. I think Ray could be in that same mix with Jordan Wicks, Javier Assad. I would assume going into opening day, Ray would be your number 5 if they don't add another starting pitcher. And it's, I understand a lot of the frustration because they're not making moves that are putting this team at a 90+ win projection right now. Adding Kyle Tucker, it might put them to 86, 87. They won 83 last year. They were projected 83 to 85. Getting a guy like Kyle Tucker, replace him with Cody Bellinger, I maybe can put you at 87. Maybe more if prospects hit. But
if the wind blows out this year, no.
Well, then how's the pitching going to do, Luke?
Hey, you're right. I saw two things on social today that opened my eyes a little bit. One was Nico Horner on Instagram posting his off season in San Francisco, and in one of them, he's got a massive brace on his arm. And I'm like,
I did see that. Well, he had that surgery, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But you forget about it, and then you see your everyday second baseman walking around with what looks like a bionic arm, and you're like, oh.
Okay, I don't know when that picture was taken.
I don't either. I don't either. But it opened my eyes, right? I was like, oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
And the other thing was, I'm trying to think what was the other one I saw. Oh, Rich Biesterfeld posted a picture already of Shaw in Arizona taking ground balls at third.
Yeah.
Like it. I like the fact that he's ahead of the game. Yeah. He's getting there earlier than he needs to be there, and he's taking ground balls at third base.
Dude's trying to win a job, and
I
respect it. And it sounds like he's motivated. You love to see that. It's as much as me and Luke sit here and we talk about we need to sign this guy and we need to sign that guy because it will increase your projection total. It doesn't mean we're sitting here and we're not having hope or some sort of belief for any of our top prospects. Best case scenario, Matt Shaw takes third base and is somewhere between a 3 and 4 WAR player in 2025. I think realistically he's probably more of like a 2 to 3 WAR player. If in more real in realistic terms, like maybe he can give you better numbers than what the combination of Christopher Morel and Isaac Paredes did last year.
That would be nice.
If he's just simply better than that, I think we'd all take it as a win in 2025. I don't know if that means they're going to make the playoffs.
Rookie of the year.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Wouldn't hurt.
I have high hopes for Matt Shaw. I just would like there to be some sort of insurance policy behind him, just in case if he struggles like PCA did when he came up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If he just takes off, great. This team might run away at the division if that happens, but I don't know how you can project that, man.
You can't project any of it unless you exceed projections, which we want to do. We're going to talk about the Kyle Tucker thing in a second, but first, a word from our great sponsors here at CHGO. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary is your home for judgment-free cannabis shopping. They have a crazy selection, over 100 different strains to choose from with an easy online ordering and in-store pickup. Wherever you are in Illinois, Sunnyside has a location for you. They have spots as far south as Champaign, as far north as South Beloit. Stop into the store nearest you for expert guidance from their staff or select from quality lines like Cresco and Floracal. Available now. Good news, limited time offer. Island Vibes, available in disposable vapes, 510 carts, and live resin gummies. You know, Cody, I'm picking up Mini Seagal's award-winning chocolates at Sunnyside because it's cold, and what makes you feel warmer than a little chocolate? You can pick them up, too, by visiting sunnyside.shop for bright buys every day, including 50% off your first 3 online purchases. That's 50% off your first 3 online purchases. Enter the promo code HICHGO at checkout to qualify. Exclusions apply. Sunnyside Cannabis Dispensary. Bright buys every day, only for 21 and older or Illinois medical card holders.
Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets to find the best value. I say this all the time. When I get off the red line at Addison, that's when I open up Game Time because I can see tickets right before the game starts at Wrigley Field.
Or right when you get to Champaign, right before tip-off.
Yeah.
They're in the warm-ups.
Yeah. Or, Gary, you're in the chat. Illinois and Indiana, we're going to have a sword fight before the game on Tuesday night.
Oh, boy. Plastic swords, please.
We can go and have a sword fight, and then we'll walk into the Assembly Hall, and hopefully Illinois bounces back after their embarrassing loss against USC on Saturday. But either way, yeah, you can do what I do and drive down to Champaign and bring up Game Time right before the game starts. The thing about Game Time is you get the cheapest tickets right before tip-off. Right before tip-off or first pitch. That's been my best experience with Game Time. Their Game Time Picks curation makes it easier to find better value for tickets to sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and a lot more. They're all in pricing toggling. Feature shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. No one hates bait and switch like Luke Stuckmeyer, my friends.
Bait and switch is the worst.
It's the worst. And then
that and chatbots.
Yes. And the seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. So you can see exactly where you're sitting. If you're going to Wrigley, don't want to be behind a pole, Game Time has you covered. And they have the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CHGO for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with code CHGO for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Very nice. What day is the Indiana-Illinois game?
I believe it's Tuesday.
Oh, you and Gary need to carpool. Nice cold ride.
I don't feel great.
Heaters turned up.
I don't feel great. Illinois' best player is out.
Yeah, he's out, right?
And they just got embarrassed by a team that they shouldn't have been embarrassed by. And Indiana's coming off a terrible loss against Iowa. So
which one's going to turn it around?
Which team's going to turn it around?
Okay, we talked about it a little bit at the top. The Kyle Tucker thing. He's now going to arbitration with the Cubs. They couldn't come to an agreement. The Cubs had a stretch for, I don't know, it was like a decade where they didn't have a player go to arbitration. A long stretch. Hap did go.
Until Hap, yeah.
And then Hap was kind of like, listen, this is part of the business, not a big deal. He's got the same agent as Kyle Tucker, so maybe they learned something through that process. I don't know. There's two sides of it. Some people believe it's a huge mistake. Other people think it's not that big of a deal. It's just part of the business. That's how it works. And you got to fight for every $2 million that you can fight over. In this case, $2.5 million that they were apart.
Yeah.
Because if that happens twice or once, now that's a half a Colin Ray. Or, whatever.
Yeah.
That might be the reliever that you need. That was the extra depth that you were looking for. It's the optics of it for me. I don't love the idea of Kyle Tucker coming here being $2.5 million away, if you believe you are going to try and woo him, even though, first of all, going into the offseason, if you truly believe you're going to make an offer to him and try and keep him, a competitive offer, if you truly believe that, you also have to be realistic and know, listen, we most likely will not, because of who we are, we will not make the highest offer to Kyle Tucker, even if you believe you're going to go after him. So I don't want any bad taste in his mouth. I don't want him to even think about Wrigley not being the place for him until it's 38 and raining at Wrigley and he's sitting there in the outfield going, what am I doing here? That's the first time I want that to cross his mind.
Yeah.
I want him to go to Arizona, have great vibes, get along with all his teammates. I don't want him to even think once about, man, why couldn't they give me $2.5 million? Why are we fighting over this?
Sure.
I just don't think it's a great look if you're going to try and woo him is the only word I could think of in the future. Does this mean, in your mind, that the Cubs are looking at going, listen, we know we're not going to get him for more than 1 year, so we might as well get him for the best price we can get him for, because that's the way business is done. And if it's $2.5 million we save, it's $2.5 million we save, because you know what? We're pretty confident we're not getting him long-term anyway. I hope that is not the sign. I hope that's not going through anybody's head in the front office.
I think that's what a large majority of Cubs fans feel like right now based on how this front office and ownership group are operating, right? I don't believe that's it.
And yes, Gary, they still could settle before the hearing.
Sure, yeah. I will say this. I agree with you on the optics. It doesn't look great. Kyle Tucker's been in the organization for a month, right? But at the same time, you want to,
zoom out
a little bit. The Red Sox and Jarren Duran are going to arbitration over like $800,000, and he was one of their best players last year. He's a guy that they should probably be trying to have a good relationship with.
I think that's fair.
I think that the optics don't look great, but I also think at the end of the day, Kyle Tucker's going to be a Cub long term if the Cubs just pay the guy. I don't even necessarily look at it from Kyle Tucker's view. Do you think Kyle Tucker is even part of this particular negotiation?
He knows what's going on.
Right, he knows what's going on, but I think that in some universe, maybe this one, that he just wants to play baseball and he wants to go earn that big contract. That's what I think. I don't think that this $2.5 million is necessarily holding him back from man, do I want to re-sign here? I don't personally fully think that's a thing. I don't think it looks great. Absolutely. But I also don't think at the end of the day that this is the worst thing. I don't think this is the end of the world. It's going to come down to, are the Cubs going to pay him? The worst case scenario for me is if we're sitting here in June and this team isn't very good and we're talking about trading Tucker. That's the worst case scenario to me, because then you really aren't trying to extend this guy. That's the worst case scenario. That's the narrative that has made me cringe the most on social media since this guy was traded to the Cubs. That's how much this front office and this ownership group have, what's the word I'm thinking of? They have conditioned us to feel like.
That's it.
They have conditioned us to feel like that there's absolutely no way this can happen, and they made this trade just so they could trade him for prospects at the end of the trade deadline in July. Give me a break. Let me enjoy something, man. As negative and as pessimistic as I've been about this front office and everything the last 2 months, can we at least have a little bit of hope that they're legitimately gonna try and pay this guy? Can we try? Now, again, this doesn't make me feel great, but at the end of the day, I also feel like it's not black or white. It's not a signal that they're not gonna re-sign him at the end of next season.
It's about the imagery of it, though, right?
Sure, yeah. The optics aren't great, man.
I would guess that most most former players wouldn't say or current players wouldn't say that they're just totally turned off by going to arbitration. They probably wouldn't say it. They know it's part of the business, yada, yada, yada. However, there is human nature in anything you do. If you negotiate with your boss and he says, "Nah, we're not giving you $1,000 more,"
Yeah.
don't you twist your head and think about the other ways that they might be spending $1,000 or different things like that? Of course it does.
Yeah.
Of course, that's just human nature. I'm not worried. I'm really not as worried about that part of it as I am just the picture that they are painting as an organization which has become reality by most people that have their eyes open, that the Cubs are nickel and diming a lot of stuff. They're not playing big boy. While they are outspending the division, it's not hard because they're in a division with all small market teams.
Yeah.
If they were in a division with big market teams like the Yankees and the Red Sox, people would be looking at them going, they're doing a lot of nickel and diming, right?
Well,
they just are. And that's why people are saying, that leads to the Colin Ray signing being called another mid player as opposed to, well, this guy could be their 5th or 6th or 7th starter. It's just a depth piece, not a big deal. But that's why people are starting to look at it and say, oh, look at that nickel dime move. And people that don't know that Roki's going to be cheap anyways, and they're not taking it, they're saying, look what they're doing instead of the Roki thing, instead of throwing tons of money, which you can't, right? That's not part of it. But, and it's why the Soto conversation goes on, because why you need to make a guy an offer.
Right.
You need to make him an offer. And it's what Matthew Boyd. Why Matthew Boyd? Why can't you go get Corbin Burns? It's all of those things together, and then finally bringing in the one superstar player that we've begged for 3 years. He finally gets to town, and the first order of business with him is over $2.5 million. Is it the end of the world? No, but it adds to the giant, bigger picture of the Cubs running a very tight book.
Yes.
And hopefully it doesn't mean that the payroll, because we said trading Bellinger would hopefully just take that money and push it somewhere else. Now, if you start trying to save 2.5 here and a little bit, a little piece of that Bellinger money should go in the pocket too. Now you start seeing, please don't tell me the payroll is going down.
Yeah. That the fear that I have that this team isn't going to have a payroll near the luxury tax tier as of today is significantly more intense than it was a month ago. A month ago when they made the move for Tucker, it was like, okay. And that was after they had already made the signing for Boyd. I felt like they were making really solid moves. And at this point, because I'm still optimistic that they're going to fill out the rest of this roster, I still have some optimism that we will feel good on opening day about this roster. But whether it's because the Roki Sasaki decision has slowed down the market,
probably,
or not, whether it is or not, the fact that it's been very quiet these last 3 weeks or so is starting to creep into the back of my head of I've watched this movie before.
Yes,
brother. I've watched this movie before, and it just doesn't make any sense. If you make a move like you do for Kyle Tucker and you have to, and you're trying to win the division, and you're openly telling people that you're really trying to win, and Jed Hoyer's going into a lame duck season, I'm okay that they didn't sign Corbin Burns. They were never really linked to him. I'm okay that you didn't sign Juan Soto as much as I think he would have changed your franchise directory completely over the next 10 years, whatever. I'm okay that you didn't do a lot of things. You added the superstar that you needed. But this roster it's projected still somewhere between 85 to 90 wins. That's where it's at. They need to get to 90. They need to get to 90 to 95, man. And they can't be finished. They cannot be finished. I refuse to believe that they're finished until we see all the players showing up to spring training and most of the free agents are off the market. Another name that they could have signed, and I'm okay that, I guess, in a way that they didn't sign him, was Jeff Hoffman. 3 years to the Blue Jays. Apparently, the medicals weren't great, and that's why the Orioles didn't sign him, and they went and got Andrew Kittredge or whatever.
Nobody has good medicals anymore.
All I know is that he was one of the top relievers on the market that you could have gone and got, and he was for 3 years, $30 million, $33 million, whatever. Jorge Lopez, like I said earlier, like, these are moves that are like they're right up Jed Hoyer's alley. But what are we doing? So I know I'm sounding irrational and I'm like venting a little bit. I am optimistic that they're going to fill out the rest of the roster, but I don't blame fans who are
getting
concerned.
I do
not blame them because I'm getting a little concerned. I want them to finish the offseason. That's what I want them to do. And this is what the problem is with baseball offseason. Like compared to the NFL and the NBA, like everyone makes their moves the first like 2 weeks of free agency and all of that, and you know how teams are going to look immediately. And baseball is just like we don't know until like spring training. Like I just would like to know what we're doing so I can take the time to figure out if I'm going to buy into this team or not.
All right, coming up next, our conversation with a friend out west who might have a path for the Cubs to do something through trade. But first, a word from our great sponsors, Cody.
Yeah, whether it's pro or college, the app to bet football is Circus Sports Illinois. Circus Sports, it's sports betting the way it should be. Circus Sports Illinois has high betting limits, low holds, and exceptional customer service. Bet on all your favorite teams in every game this season. Spreads, props, futures, or in-game. Circus Sports has it. Fund and bet like a pro from anywhere, anytime in Illinois. Download your new bookie today at circusports.com. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem, 1-800-GAMBLER. I think I'm going to take the Vikings tonight.
Oh, yeah?
I think so, yeah.
I like the Vikes tonight, although their quarterback needs to show up.
I can't believe I'm going to bet on Sam Darnold in a playoff game. I really can't believe I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, it's I didn't expect the Vikings to be as good as they were this year.
Right.
I'll give you that. Hey, our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that will not break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by more than 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames, crystal clear optics, and making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. I like to wear them fishing and golfing. More fishing than golfing.
Me at Wrigley Field.
And at Wrigley Field and the bleachers, also very good.
Yeah.
Let you see that ball coming right at you. There have been hundreds of options out there to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style. They probably have a pair in Cubs colors. In fact, I know they do. We have them right there on our set. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, don't sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. If you don't love your shades, exchange for a new pair or return them worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out their best deal of the season. You ready for this? Head to shadyrays.com and use the code CHGO. 4 letters, CHGO. For 35% off your polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself. The shades rated 5 stars by more than 300,000 people. Back here on the CHGO Cubs podcast, we talked about the Tucker thing. Is it a big deal? Not a big deal. We talked about the Colin Ray signing. Should you be mad? Should you just say it's depth? All are individual options. It all depends on how you're feeling today. It's a little cold. I can see how you're bitter.
Yeah.
But it is sunny.
It is.
So maybe that warms you up
Cubs
a little
convention
bit.
is this week. And
It is Cubs convention week.
As we know, the Cubs like to make a move before the Cubs convention.
They do.
To get fans all riled up and to get us all delusional.
But they might
and
just be
hopeful.
relying on Sammy, which if you'd have told Cody 3 months ago, listen, they're only going to sign Colin Ray and Matthew Boyd, but Sammy will be at Cubs convention, you would have taken it.
I would have. Yeah.
You would have taken it.
Well, that's a discussion that shouldn't have got to where it's at. But yes, I would have been someone who ate up all of that.
Yeah,
I would have. And listen, if you're not, then that's fine. That's fine. I totally understand it. But as a massive supporter of him,
it's gonna be interesting to see. The Sammy reaction will be interesting because it's going to be a little bit of both.
Yeah.
There will be fans that will go crazy, and there will be fans that will go crazy for the opposite reason, right? There's definitely going to be boos, and there's definitely going to be fans that are just losing their mind happy.
Do you think it's sick for any of the people who actually show up to purposely go and boo?
Do I think it's sick?
Like when I say sick, it's like not like, yeah, that's
like they have a problem.
Yeah, like they have a problem. Like they need to legitimately seek help.
Yeah, where are you going, honey? Oh, I'm just heading down to Cubs convention. Thinking about booing Sammy. I'll be back by dinner.
Yeah, like to go. Like
I don't think it's sick. Have you ever been on social media? That is sick.
That is sick. Well,
everybody has a strong opinion, and everybody wants everybody else to know that strong opinion. That's the world we live in.
We have a very passionate fan base, and there are pros and cons about that. And the cons are some people are that sick where I think they might legitimately buy a pass to go to specifically boo Sammy Sosa at
Michael
Cubs
Collada's
convention.
thinking about going just to boo Ricketts outside.
I mean, shit. People are booing Ricketts every year, man.
I'm not putting words in Godfather's mouth, but I think that's what he's talking about. It's going to be pretty cold staying outside.
I will say that
it crosses the line if people go there and start booing is one thing.
Yeah.
Threatening someone or making other comments would be that's different.
And I'm not saying that.
So I'm certainly not condoning that. But if somebody wants to go boo Sammy, I don't
either. I do. We have a very passionate fan base. I wouldn't be surprised if there are a few people who are like, I'm buying a pass to specifically go and boo Sammy Sosa.
I would guess that there are people already buying passes just to go boo.
That's what I'm saying.
Not Sammy.
Or just boo in general?
Just boo 83 wins.
Well, that's not even helping because you're giving Tom Ricketts money.
That's going to happen. People want to go to that to just boo at if Ricketts family thing ever happened again. That they like to go to that to boo.
Well, apparently, according to the schedule, Tom's going to have like a reception or whatever, and he'll be there to talk to people.
See?
So, I mean, hey, if you want to go and voice your opinions, Tom, Godfather, listen, you can buy a pass and go talk to Tom yourself.
Listen, I always say, I'm not going to tell you how to cub.
No, we don't.
Do it however you want to do it, and as long as you do it with respect. Okay, so the question is, are the Cubs done adding? I don't know. It does take two to tango. So Cody hooked us up with another podcast out west that might have some answers for us. This is an interview we did recently.
We did it on Friday.
We did it Friday afternoon.
And we put it up on the YouTube channel Friday. Or, no, it's Thursday we put it up.
Thursday,
we put it up on Thursday. But yeah, we just in case no one saw it, I think it's good to put in here.
It's still valid today, even with the Ray signing. Yeah. It's still valid. Are the Cubs still pursuing that starter that we still believe that they are missing? Here's the interview. We'll talk about it afterwards. And we welcome in Lyle Goldstein from the Marine Layer podcast covering Mariners baseball. You want to know. And first of all, welcome, Lyle, and thanks for doing this for us. We appreciate it.
Yeah, Cody, Luke, thanks for having me on. This is awesome.
Let's talk this because Cody and I were discussing early in the offseason, Mariners-Cubs trade seemed like a real likely thing. They seemed like they were good partners. In your mind, what happened to that buzz? Where has it gone?
I'll kind of flip it back on your end. I feel like when Isaac Paredes was still a Cub, there was a little more wiggle room for a trade to potentially happen. But yeah, let me flip it back to you. Once Paredes got traded, you make the Kyle Tucker deal. Isn't there less room now for the Cubs to move an infielder? Because that's where the Mariners have needs. They have gaping holes right now at first, second, and third base. So there was a lot of Nico Horner discourse for a while, and I think for good reason. That's a guy I think Mariners people believe would fit in very, very well in Seattle for everything he does. But do the Cubs still have the leeway to deal an infielder at this point? Because that's what the Mariners are really looking for.
Well, I would say that, at least for Cubs fans, we feel like we have an surplus in infielders.
A plethora of infielders. Some aren't any good, but we've got infielders.
Yeah, well, when you say some aren't very good, they're bench players probably, but also names like James Triantos, a top 100 prospect in baseball. I don't think Matt Shaw was ever a serious consideration for the Cubs to move, but Triantos for sure, and he projects a lot like Nico Horner too, and he's on the verge of making his major league debut perhaps in 2025. I do think that, and I also, because of that, I have wondered how the Cubs feel about Nico Horner as well, just because Triantos could replace him. Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of been a big part of the Cubs fan discourse related to this type of conversation, if that helps you.
Yeah, I mean, Lyle, in my opinion, I would say it's still a possibility because Matt Shaw, who right now tentatively is their third baseman as a rookie and their top prospect, really is better probably at playing second base. So there is still potential that you could move Nico Hoerner and Matt Shaw could become your second baseman. That would involve the Cubs trying to find somebody to play third base. Bregman, which seems like a long shot, but that would be the path to something like that happening. I think the talks kind of died down or slowed down. I think everybody's waiting on Roki. I think the Cubs are waiting to see if they're getting a starting pitcher at a cheap price before they go out and trade away some of their prospects and maybe a Nico Hoerner or whoever that might be. So I think it's a waiting game on the Roki decision.
I think that's what Mariners people feel like too. And I don't think the Mariners are going to end up landing Roki Sasaki, but I feel like the Mariners, among a lot of teams, are waiting that out right now for a couple different reasons. Number one, to see where he lands. And number two, if it's not Seattle, if it's not, or if it is Chicago, where could the Mariners then look to make a trade? Because that's the route they're going to go at this point. It's not coming from free agency. Their ownership won't give them any money at all to spend. So if anything happens, it's going to be through the trade route. And I think once Roki Sasaki signs somewhere, they're going to look to some of those teams that did not land him, that are still looking for potential starting pitching, and could go that route. And I will say, I don't think the Mariners are exactly itching to deal Luis Castillo. There's been plenty of rumors about it this offseason, and there's been plenty of reports that they've been in talks about Castillo and other players, and that's real. But I think the Mariners are more in a mode of they would have to be blown away by a package to move them. Otherwise, they may just stand pat. So if that's the Cubs, maybe they put a package together they can't refuse. But I'm with you guys in a long-winded answer. I think Roki Sasaki and that domino falling on January 15th or maybe a couple days after will kickstart some of those discussions again.
That's interesting that you say that, because it just kind of reminds me of how the Cubs are operating and the fact that the Mariners clearly need to add bats. Like the pitching you guys have, I dream about the Cubs having this kind of pitching. And in many ways, it's a really good situation that you have, but if you're going to take that next step, if you're going to put yourself into real contention, if you're going to go win the AL West, which is tough with the Rangers and the improvements they've made this offseason, even the Athletics have made some improvements this offseason, and the Astros are the Astros. If you're going to make that next step and either win your division or at least be in that wild card, I feel like after last year watching them, you would feel like you need to add bats. And as you just said, their ownership group isn't providing the money, so the trade market is where they're headed. So I feel like it's also like a stalemate between both teams if we're talking about the Cubs and the Mariners, because from the Cubs' perspective, they have a lot of nice players. Their pitching staff is fine, but in my opinion, they could use a higher-end starter, whether that's Luis Castillo or I could dream a little bit about Brian Wu or whoever that you guys have. But I don't think the Cubs want to give Owen Casey and, like two top 100 guys. I think if it came down to it and they got tired of staring at each other, I guess, and realized that this is what we need to do, maybe they would. But my experience during the Jed Hoyer era for the Cubs is he never acts on desperation. And so I'm curious to where is this something that could potentially be brought back up before the trade deadline with the Mariners or the Cubs, maybe both, are in a situation where things played out exactly how we feel, where the Mariners, for example, the pitching's awesome, you're in there, but you need a bat. And in the Cubs' perspective, the pitching has been fine, but man, they're right there. They could put themselves into a higher ceiling potential if they add that big starting pitcher. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like both teams are so similar, and I'm curious to where or how this could go. I'm saying a lot here, and I'm sorry, but there's just so much here. Like, it just makes so much sense for me in my head that something would happen, and whether it's Luis Castillo or one of your young pitchers. The Mariners clearly need bats. The Cubs clearly need a pitcher with a higher ceiling. And I'm just like, when are these two organizations who have been mid for the last couple years going to just put their meat on the table and get something done, man?
People have been asking about the Mariners and a lot of teams. The team the Mariners seem to get linked with the most in trade talks, or the team that people seem to think is the best match made in heaven, is Baltimore. Because Baltimore's in a position where they've got all the young bats in the world. They don't have pitching. The Mariners have all these young arms and this amazing rotation, and they need bats. But it's not just Baltimore, right? Like, they've talked to Boston, they've talked to the Cubs, they've talked to a flurry of teams at this point. I would say, in terms of what the Mariners might consider giving up, I think the only guy that's even quote unquote on the table, at least right now, is Castillo. And I think partly that's because how much they love their other four arms. And I think partly, yeah. And partly that's just because they're also really inexpensive right now. Castillo is the one guy making real money. And when you have a $15 million self-imposed budget like the Mariners put on themselves, I don't know if that's made it out to Cubs land or not, but that's a real number, by the way. Mariners ownership basically came out and said, we have $15 million to spend this offseason. And you've got people sitting around saying, how in the world are you supposed to make this team better with $15 million? Yeah. So that's why these Luis Castillo rumors and trade talks have come into place, because they say, well, if you clear some money, maybe that frees you up to add some more bats. I still say that with the idea and belief of, if the Mariners were to trade Castillo, that they would not do it unless they got a real package back. And whether that's right or not, I think that's where the team stands and what they believe in the sense of, you guys might totally throw your arms up at this, and I might even too, but if I were the Mariners, I would guess they're looking for something like a controllable bat and a controllable arm back for Castillo, in the sense of,
wow.
If we've talked about Kobe Mayo a lot for Castillo, just in terms of that is a third baseman right on the brink of the majors. He's had a cup of coffee in the big leagues, has 40 home run potential. So who would that guy be with the Cubs? I mean, they could go the Nico Horner route, although he's got less club control. But if I'm the Mariners, I bet you they're looking for something back like Matt Shaw and Javier Assad, which if you're the Cubs and Jed Hoyer, you probably say no to that, right?
Yeah.
I
would think so.
Yeah. I mean, me personally, like, if I'm giving up Matt Shaw or Owen Casey, who I think those are the two best bats prospect-wise that they have, if I'm giving up two of those guys or one of those guys, like, I wouldn't be talking about Luis Castillo. I'd be talking about Bryce Miller or Logan Gilbert. And like, this is just the state of doing business in baseball right now. Like, so many teams, and like the Mariners is such a great example. You're talking about ownership only wanting to spend $15 million, or giving that the budget of $15 million. No wonder they don't want to trade those guys, because they're so cheap, and eventually they're going to have to pay them, and they probably won't. Right? Like, this is the problem with baseball. This has turned into just us talking about the problem in baseball.
Well, fan bases aren't going to be happy with the trade. I'm curious from your perspective. It doesn't have to be a player. Like, you gave us a hypothetical of players going both ways. What's Castillo worth? What type of pitcher is he, and has he been in your eyes? Like, why should the Cubs be interested in upping their ante if that's where it's at right now?
Well, you can look at it a couple of different ways. I mean, just a season ago in 23, Luis Castillo finished 5th in Cy Young voting. This guy has been an ace, and that's who the Mariners traded for him to be. And both in the back half of 22 when they got him, and in 2023, he was exactly that. Now, in 2024, he was still good. He was still a really reliable arm that went 6-2 almost every time out and kept his team in the game. But there's a reason he's out on the table now, and it's not just for the sake of his money. I'm sure that's part of it, but didn't have the same command that he's had in some years past. Slider wasn't quite as good, got into some bad counts. Fastball isn't, it's funny, he's evolved a lot as a pitcher over the years, because when he was with the Reds, he had one of the most dominant changeups in baseball. That was his bread and butter. That was his go-to pitch. That was his out pitch. Once he got to the Mariners, and even that first half of 22 with the Reds, he kind of got away from the changeup. It started to lose some of its value, and he became very fastball heavy and fastball effective. And now, look, he still has an abundance of weapons in his arsenal, but his fastball, which has been his best pitch over the last couple of years, it didn't have the same effect that it had in 22 and 23. So I guess this is a long-winded way of me saying, well, he's still been good, and he's still been a very valuable arm, and I think the Mariners would love to keep him in the rotation if they can. But he's probably the weak link of the 5 at this point because he's getting older. And in 24, you saw a slight decrease in production. Now, that's not to say he couldn't bounce back in 25 and it was just kind of a one-off. But I think if you're some teams out there that might be looking at the idea of trading for him, like the Cubs, you might see some of that. And you might also see the idea of, well, he pitches in the most pitcher-friendly park in baseball. How would he do outside of Seattle? So who are you getting in Luis Castillo? If you get him, you're getting a great pitcher. You're getting a guy that is still a 2-starter, maybe 3-starter at his worst. But yeah, he's not the Logan Gilbert of this rotation. He's not the George Kirby of this rotation. And I think that's why he's on the trade block. I mean, I don't know if he's on the trade block, but that's why his name has been floated around plenty this offseason in trade talks.
It's like Nico Hoerner. The Cubs love Nico Hoerner, but he doesn't have a ton of power at second base. He's good defensively. He does all the things you like, but is there a way to possibly upgrade there? Maybe.
Would you rather have the years of control and upside of Kobe Mayo or Nico Hoerner? And you don't even have to answer that. Like, that's pretty obvious. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And especially if you're the Mariners, where Hoerner, if I have this right, slated to make what, $12 million this year? Where
around that,
Mayo's going to make league minimum for the next 3 until he hits arbitration. So yeah, especially if you're the Mariners. Let me flip it back to you guys, because this is talking from our end and what we feel like the Mariners would be looking for, because they certainly have not set that price anywhere low on Luis Castillo. And I think that's part of the reason the trade hasn't happened yet. But you guys are on the other side of this. If you were willing to make a trade for Luis Castillo, what would you guys be willing to give up?
Me personally, like, it starts with James Triantos. I'm willing to move on from James Triantos because I think he projects a lot like Nico Hoerner. Nico Hoerner has 2 more years of control, and clearly the Cubs love him. And he's a proven major league commodity. But I also
is top 100, and he's sort of blocked.
Right, yeah. And that's kind of the thing, too. But I don't know how many more at-bats that he needs in the minors. Like, he got to AAA last year. He started the year in AA, got to AAA. But I certainly think there's a lot of value in a player like him right now. And I think that for what the Mariners need, he is a guy that could certainly be on their roster, if not on opening day, but, you know, by midseason at least. And obviously there's a lot of, you don't know what's going to happen, but he will make the league minimum. And so it makes sense for them.
I just don't know who the pitcher, like, if you're saying some sort of controllable pitcher back, that's the tricky part, because I don't think the Cubs are in a position to deal arms right now. Like, they're just not. In my eyes, they still have to add multiple arms. And so if that's something they're looking for, that gets trickier unless they're willing to just take prospects. And I don't think the Mariners just want prospects. Like, they're trying to be considered as a serious team, just like the Cubs are now. And both teams are just really sort of walking a fine line of being okay.
I personally, not to cut you off, I personally think that I personally wouldn't give away Hoerner for someone like Castillo based off everything you just said about Castillo. Like, I think the things that I feel confident about Castillo and why I'm intrigued about the Cubs potentially adding him, he's always healthy. He eats innings for you. Those are the 2 things. And you don't see a lot of that in baseball these days. Those are the 2 things. But his baseball savant, it's out there for the public to see, right? Like, there's reasons for concern, and you explain them, right? So I'm more willing to give up one of the Cubs prospects who basically has been blocked because of Nico Hoerner. And if I have to throw in, I personally would be willing to move a Jordan Wicks or a Javier Assad as part of that. I think Cubs fans might think I'm being a little too heavy, but at the same time, there's the money that Castillo is owed. I honestly don't know if the Cubs would be willing to take that on either. So I think that it's so much more complex, and that's why this hasn't happened. But I think as far as players, Triantos, Jordan Wicks, or Javier Assad, I think that's a conversation starter at least.
Cheap trading with cheap is tough. It's tough to find that.
At least for you guys, what would you consider yourselves mid-market? We call ourselves big market, but we don't act like it.
Yeah, I'd call the Mariners mid-market, and they often don't act like a mid-market. That's what I'd say. Yeah. In the sense of it's below that a lot of the time. Yeah, here's where you run into a problem, right? Well, so first off, to your point about the money, I think that's a very real point. And I don't know if the Mariners are operating like that's even a factor when it should be. I think they may be looking at Castillo's contract and saying, look at what pitchers are getting on the market right now. Like Castillo's contract is super valuable because all these guys are getting crazy money. Look at what even somebody like Luis Severino and Nathan Eovaldi got in free agency. That's essentially what Luis is making, where if you're on the other side of it, just because the Mariners think the contract shouldn't be a barrier because he's on somewhat of a friendly deal, that doesn't mean that other teams that are looking at him are saying the same thing. They're still looking at it, like the Cubs may be, and saying, we still have to take on $24 million a year. That's not nothing. So you run into that problem of it, and then you run into the problem of, since these two teams are in similar boats, the Mariners don't want to give up that much off their big league roster because they want to be competitive in 2025. But every team they're going to talk with in trades, like the Cubs, don't want to give up that much off their big league roster either of impact because they're trying to compete in 2025. And this is where the stalemate comes to head again, because neither side wants to balk and feel like they're really subtracting off their big league roster. And this is probably another reason why either the Castillo trade is taking a long time or it just wouldn't happen with any team.
All right, we'll just keep on waiting. This has been fun trying to figure it out either way. Lyle Goldstein from the Marine Layer podcast, part of the Just Baseball Media Network. Hey, Lyle, let's do this again during the season when we recreate this trade scenario right before the trade deadline. Does that sound fair?
That sounds great. Luke, Cody, thanks so much for having me. This has been a blast, and happy to hop on anytime.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Have a great season, hopefully for you.
You guys too.
All right, so that was Lyle was making some great points, and it's interesting conversation. I think the Ray thing maybe dampens it even more a little bit. Not that they're comparable pitchers, just that if you're trying to stack that up, I think the Cubs at this point are waiting to see what Roki does.
Yeah.
Whatever that decision might be.
I like that conversation we had because it certainly gives you a better idea of how the Mariners are thinking. And as much as I think that it's a perfect trade partner with the Cubs, or with the Cubs and the Mariners is a good trade partner, like, you have to think about how those teams are thinking too. And I think a lot of fans always are just like, Jed's sitting on his hands, like he won't just complete the trade. And I think you have to look at how the other teams are looking as well. And I learned some things during that conversation about how the Mariners are operating, or it seems like they're operating right now. And yeah, I mean, I think the Castillo trade is something that maybe could happen down the road, but at this point, I think it's pretty much dead, even after Roki signs. So, and even a trade for one of their young controllable starters. I mean, the way that they're operating, it's like as much as they need bats, they understand just how valuable those guys are, and they're just not going to move them. So how they're going to improve their team and start scoring runs at a better rate in 2025 will be interesting to see how they do that. But yeah, I'm just kind of.
We also didn't mention it, but I think Nico's injury put a damper on a lot of the early trade ideas that they may or may not have had. Not that I'm saying they were shopping him, but teams would be interested in him.
Yeah,
so they were probably getting some calls about him, and I think it's
been dead for the last month and a half or so, but yeah.
I just saw him in the robotic arm. I'm telling you. It scared me.
Yeah.
Hey, did you guys see, the two goofballs, Yankee fans, that reached into Mookie Betts' arm and grabbed his arm at the World Series? They're now, this is a couple days ago, banned from all major league stadiums. Good.
Yeah.
I said at the moment, is that too harsh? No. Once you started grabbing the guy's wrist and he's hanging from a wall, you've crossed the line. You've crossed the line. You're not. We got to patrol right field. Just go back to your basement and do
I think it was one
of
the few things that all of baseball fans agreed upon when it happened. Like,
it's bad.
Those guys deserve to be banned for life for what they just did, because, like we talked about.
What part of it? I said the crossing the line is when you grab. It wasn't reaching for the ball. It wasn't even really trying to pull the ball out of his glove. Once the guy was hanging from the wall and you were grabbing his wrist, you were done at a baseball game.
Yeah.
Forever.
At least they can put that on their resume now. But I mean, I'm just baseball fans rarely agree on everything, and I think we all collectively were like, those guys deserve to be banned for life. So,
two goobers.
Yeah.
Well, have fun.
They definitely have a story that they can tell their families and their
you know
friends
that
and
they're
stuff the
going to
rest of their
try and
lives.
come up with some sort of disguise to get into games, but they won't be season ticket holders. That's for
Yeah,
sure.
it is. It'll be curious to see. Like,
You think the Sox would keep them out of the ballpark if they tried to pay for a ticket?
no.
Serious
But
question.
my thing that I was getting ready to say is like, is there just going to be a sign of these two goobers across all the league? Like,
Do not allow.
do not allow this guy.
I guess so.
Like, imagine, like, could they just go across the country to like,
They could get into a ballpark if they wanted
to the A's,
Yes.
to the A's AAA park.
Buy
that
a
they're gonna play
ticket,
next
pull their
year.
head down with some sunglasses on, and
Yeah.
scan a ticket. Of course they could.
Yeah, like
But I like that they said they won't be able to get in.
now.
Anyways,
I will say that because the most tickets are now done mobily, they might have to buy the ticket through a different account.
yeah, right.
You know, like not their own name, because
have
I'm
somebody
sure
buy 'em
MLB
the
won't let
ticket.
them. Right. That's the only way that I feel like they might be able to get through.
You have to do a baseline when they walk in the stadium of like, answer the following questions. Derek
Scan the
Jeter
eyeballs.
stinks. See if it just like kind of
See
goes
if
off
their
a little
blood
bit.
pressure goes up at all. All right, thanks for checking out the CHGO Cubs podcast. We're back at 11:30 tomorrow. More Cubs conversation then. It is Cubs Convention Week. Thanks for watching. Until tomorrow, don't forget, fly the W.
We all silly like the mayor.